Hello folks, and welcome into day 9 of your Race to World First daily recap. My name is Kexman and I'm here to bring you all of the updates from the race, so be sure to follow and you'll not miss out on your daily recap. Before we get into the action, let's take a look at the leaderboard from our friends at Raider.io. Be sure to head over to raider.io/RWF for your live look at the race. A little bit of breaking news for you team. As I was recording this and putting the finishing touches to the recap, we actually saw a World 4th Silken Court kill as Hotpot Hero have re-cleared on the Chinese reset and will now be progressing on Queen Ansurek alongside Liquid, Echo and Method. But now for the leaderboard. In first place we can see Liquid, in second place we have Echo, Method in third. As mentioned, Hotpot Hero moving on to 7 out of 8 in fourth. Zbox in fifth. In sixth, we have JTH. Instant Dollars in seventh. End Myth in eighth. Fat Shark Yes in ninth. And in 10th, Honestly. With the start of day 9, there were two things that everybody had on their mind. Firstly, how quickly would Echo and Method re-clear? And secondly, just how much progress would Liquid be able to make on their first full day of Queen Ansurek? Echo were first to wake up on the EU side and started the reset jobs with heroic splits, Mythic BOE farm and re-clear of Nerub-ar. Everything was looking smooth until they hit Nexus Princess Kaiveza. In their first kill, all guilds decided to full send on Vantus runes, so in the re-clear they would have a slightly more difficult time. The gear increase certainly helped, but the Princess remained one of the tougher challenges. Liquid were able to clear through Kaiveza in 12 pulls, yet for Echo it remained a much larger block than they had hoped. With Method waking up slightly later than normal, thanks to their 4 AM heroics the previous night, the pressure was on Echo to clear as quickly as possible to keep the distance between the two teams. They eventually took down Kaiveza, but with 40 pulls it was certainly much longer than they had wanted. Echo made quick work and moved on to Silken Court as Method made their way through their re-clear, and by the end of the raid night they were on Kaiveza, trying to get ahead as much as they could for the next day. Again, the boss was still a challenge for all three of the guilds re-clearing, and they knew they could save time if they managed to not get stuck as Echo had. Whilst they didn't manage to clear before the end of their raid night, they certainly looked to be setting a quicker pace than Echo had in time spent overall. Liquid meanwhile woke up and knew that it was nothing but Queen ahead of them, so they wasted little time in figuring out just what awaited them in the final encounter of Nerub-ar Palace. Phase 1 seems to remain very similar to what we've seen in both normal and heroic, just with increased numbers in both damage and amount of the abilities. It certainly seemed as though we were in for a long stretch with the Queen, as it certainly isn't an easy phase, but eventually we start to see progression into the intermission and finally the platforms of Phase 2. Not only did we end up seeing just how tough this would be, but also the very specific Mythic edition. It seems as though there are portals on each platform that require players to go through, or else they explode and wipe the raid. Not only this, but each one of the players that go through get a debuff, meaning they cannot go through another portal again. This effectively makes almost your entire team rotate to a different platform through the phase, increasing the difficulty by a fair amount. Progression was slow, with Liquid making their way through the fight and getting small incremental jumps, but then around pool 135, they finally stepped into P3 for the first time. On both normal and heroic, getting to P3 is pretty much giving you a kill, but that very much is not the case on Mythic. With 3 ad spawns instead of 2 on heroic, as well as them spawning almost immediately, it means the difficulty is spiked once more. With what we think is the final phase being reached, Liquid made a few more pulls, but with it being the end of their raid night, they decided to call it and head to bed, ready for another day of Queen Ansurek progression. Meanwhile, over in the EU, our next groups attempting regicide awoke, and Method made very quick work of both Nexus Princess and Silken Court, with only 7 pulls on the deadly duo before Ansurek. Echo also awoke and knew they could spend the day progressing Queen from the start, and we saw a very similar progression cycle compared to Liquid the night before. Soon, we also saw Method standing in front of Ansurek, giving us a true triple threat at the top of Nerub-ar Palace. With the ability to have seen both Liquid and Echo progressing, as well as getting an eye level of 625.8 from their splits and farms, the highest of the big three, it will be interesting to see how their progression fares compared to Liquid and Echo, with a current best of 65.54%. With the big three all sitting around the same percentage, the real true show of where they each stand will be where they are in the fight. With Day 9 giving us our first look at the top 3 working through Queen Ansurek, the next 24 hours are due to be a very exciting time for fans of the race. Who's going to really take the advantage in this final stretch, and who's going to fall at the final hurdle? Only time will tell, so be sure not to miss out on any of your daily recaps.